Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Mr. John Graham. Hey, John.
Hey, how you doing, Kim?
I am good. I am excited to have you on because I know you have stories and I love stories. And these are true stories. So, very excited to get started on this.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and yeah, I can guarantee they're all true. Some of them may not seem that way, but I'm telling you, they are.
Okay. Well, just so people know you, I'm just going to read a short bio.
All right.
So, John Graham, as a U.S. Foreign Service officer for 15 years, you loved adventure, and we're going to get into all that adventure. But for the last 40 years, you've been the leader of the Giraffe Heroes Project, a global movement inspiring people to stick their necks out to solve public problems and giving them tools to succeed. His speeches, blogs, podcasts, and interviews have a global audience. And you have written several books. So we'll get into that during the podcast. But just so we can spend all the time hearing your stories, tell us about you, where it all started.
I guess the bumper sticker for my life is that I'm lucky to be alive. I had that kind of a life. Didn't start that way. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, which is a very placid little city in the northwestern United States, if anyone doesn't know. And I grew up in a very ordinary but loving family, and nothing ever happened there, and nothing probably ever would happen to my life. I was expected to graduate from high school and go to the University of Washington and settle down, marry the girl next door, yada yada. Then a weird thing happened when I was just 17 years old. I won't go into all of it, but the fact is that I got a job as a seaman on a ship going to the Far East and back, and I was just 17 years old. And on those days, ships, there were no container ships. This was a big ship, and it was run by 50 or 60 really big, tough guys, like Terry and the Pirates type stuff, and it was going to the Far East, and I was going to be part of that crew. Whew, wow! So I'm really excited, of course, and of course I'm completely raw and know nothing. And the seamen recognized that, and I think between themselves, among themselves, they decided that on that trip they were going to give me some life lessons that I would never learn in school, and they didn't disappoint. They didn't disappoint. Uh, anyway, the first night, or maybe it was the second night on this trip, I'm up on the deck as the ship is sailing across the Pacific, and one of the seamen starts, making sexual advances, and another seaman grabs this guy, shoves him up against the bulkhead, wham, and starts cussing at him and beating him up, and tells him to stay away from me, and then throws him down on the deck and cusses again. I had never heard such magnificent cussing in my whole life. I mean, I tell you, I come from this placid little community. I mean, this is like, what? Okay, fine. So I'm so impressed because, like a lot of young men at that age, I'm looking for examples, roles for what it is to be a man. And I didn't know. All I know is that at school I was getting kicked around by bullies because I really couldn't fight back. And my father wasn't the role I wanted because he was a nice guy. I loved him, but he was very, very gentle. He got kicked around by all the adult males at his office and passed over for promotions and whatever. And he never fought for himself. So I was thinking, oh, I can't grow up to be like my dad. So I'm there on this ship, and this guy does this thing, this cussing and knocking this guy around. I said, "Oh man, that's what it's like to be a man. That's manhood." And I go back down to my cabin, and I remember that night I practiced cussing like this guy. His name was Roy, big black guy, weighed maybe 250 pounds, and I practiced slamming an imaginary foe up against the wall. And that was like, wow. And the whole trip was kind of like that. I mean, there was a barroom brawl and other stuff. I was over there in the Far East with these guys for most of the summer, learning these life lessons. And I won't go into details, this being a family channel, on all what those lessons were. But there they were. But the thing was, Kim, was that this opened the world to me. All of a sudden, I understood that the world was not Tacoma, Washington. The world was this huge, broad, colorful place with stuff going on. Some of it was violent, but even so, there was just like an amazing amount of adventure out there, and I didn't want to miss it. So it gave me a completely different view of the world and a completely different view of what it was to be a man. I thought being a man was like Roy or like John Wayne, tough, violent. And two summers later, just for college, I found myself hitchhiking in Europe, and I found out there was a war going on just a few hundred miles south in Algeria. Rebels were trying to take over the government from the French, and I thought, well, I'd never been in a war before. That sounds really interesting. So I hitchhiked down to through Spain to Morocco, and went into Algeria, and there was no border or border guards because a war going on. But at least I was smart enough to put an American flag on my chest. And that way the rebels wouldn't take me for a Frenchman and shoot me. Just the opposite. The rebels couldn't have been nicer. They even got people to take me where I wanted to go by at gunpoint. So, it's like, oh man, what an adventure. And then, no, the summer after that, I was with a group of climbers that made the first ascent of one of the most dangerous mountain faces on the planet, something bigger and taller and tougher than anything on Mount Everest, the north face of Mount McKinley, Denali in Alaska. It's a wonder we weren't all wiped out, but we weren't. We made this first ascent. And then after I graduated from college, I decided I would hitchhike around the world, and I did so. I not across the Pacific, of course, but I hitchhiked around the world. And I had a contract from the Boston Globe to report on every war I came across. And I did that. And I was in Cyprus during the war there, then in Laos and Vietnam. And again, time after time, I would have these crazy adventures, and every time I walked away from them, without a scratch. I should have been killed, I don't know, half a dozen times already. But I wasn't. And every time I walked away, I thought I'm invulnerable. I know a lot of young people when you're 20 years old think you're invulnerable, right? Well, to me, this became like a passion. I knew I was invulnerable. I wasn't going to get hurt. So I kept upping the ante, and nothing mattered but the next adrenaline rush. And so I came to the point in my life where I was no longer a kid. I was like 21, 22, had graduated from college, and I wasn't independently wealthy, so I had to earn a living. And I thought, well, what's important to me in life is adventure. That's what's important. And where can I continue a life of adventure and get paid for it? And so I settled on joining the U.S. Foreign Service. Um, and I got in, and sure enough, they didn't disappoint. Then my second assignment in the Foreign Service, I was in the middle of the revolution in Libya when Muammar Gaddafi came to power in a coup d'état. And I was right in the middle of it, and I was just loving it, just loving it. The other people and the Americans in the embassy were freaking out. But every time I saw a burning car or people throwing rocks, I thought, this is terrific. I love it. It was crazy. So I then tell the State Department, okay, fine, I'm indestructible, and not only that, but now I'm pretty tough, right? I'm 6.5 feet tall. I'm pretty damn tough, and I've been through all this stuff. So send me to the most dangerous assignment you've got in the then war in Vietnam. And they didn't disappoint. They sent me to the city of Hue, which is in the northern part of what was then South Vietnam, just 50 miles south of the demarcation line, the DMZ, that then separated North Vietnam from South. So it was an incredibly dangerous place to be, and I was the advisor to the mayor of Hue. So, I was a target for assassination every day I was there. But again, I was loving it. It was a shooting war, and I was right in the middle of it. Um, so that was my life up to then. Um, I had become an adrenaline junkie. Nothing mattered to me. But the problem with that is that in order to do that, I'd had to nail like a huge piece of plywood over my heart because I needed to be a real man. I needed to be John Wayne. I needed to be one of those guys. And they didn't talk much and they didn't deal with soft stuff because that was what women did and they were violent. And so that's what I became. I became one of those men and I was living my life that way. And then something happened. It happened during a battle in Vietnam. And like I say, I was no longer a kid then. I was in my mid-20s, and the risks I were taking weren't just about me, but what I was doing was having the effect of life or death on a whole lot of people. And we were at a point when the North Vietnamese attacked South Vietnam 3 years before they actually finished off the job. They tried to take over Vietnam in 1971-72, something called the Easter Offensive, and they poured across the border into South Vietnam. And of course, the city of Hue was right in their path. So the South Vietnamese troops who were supposed to protect the city pretty much broke and ran. They had poor leadership. The city officials broke and ran as well. So I and three other American civilians were basically in charge of the city of 250,000 people, and there were another 250,000 refugees, and there was a war, and the North Vietnamese troops were 10 miles, 8 miles, 6 miles from the city gates. All of the city was almost going to fall. And there was a tremendous battle going on. In the middle of this battle, I'm thinking, I hate this war. This war is stupid. I know it's lost, and not only that, it's wrong. It's evil. I felt that way. I knew that. I could see that myself. I was there in the middle of it. And yet I'm doing all this stuff because I don't really give a damn about anything but me. My life has become incredibly selfish. All I care about is satisfying my own lust for adventure. I don't give a damn about the poverty that I'm inflicting on other people. And I can't live the rest of my life that way. All of a sudden, it hit me. And I remember just putting my head down in the middle of that battle, and I think I was crying. I think I was weeping at how shallow my life had become. Uh, it was a real turning point. It turned out that the skies cleared, and the next morning, American warplanes from U.S. carriers off the coast were able to fly over the city and blast the hell out of the attacking North Vietnamese army. And so my life was saved again. Um, and I survived that one, but I didn't survive inside. I didn't survive that moment of recognition that my life needed to change because I couldn't go on living this way. I just couldn't. There was a soft part of me. There was a compassionate side of me. I'd completely ignored it. So I go back. I go to Stanford. The State Department sends me to Stanford for a year. Good thing they did. I had a healthy dose of what was then called PTSD. I'd walk on the shadow sides of the street, Palo Alto, California, to avoid sniper fire. But mostly my insides were just completely topsy-turvy. I needed to find who I was. At those days in California, California being California, there were things then called encounter groups, which is where 6, 8 people would get together and spill their guts and try to talk honestly about their lives and help each other to life recognitions that were important, sometimes life-changing. And I lucked out. I got into an encounter group, a group of men, um, and it was a week-long retreat in the mountains south of San Francisco. And for a week, I told this whole group what a great adventure I was. I told them about my mountain climbing and the bullets whistling by my ear. And I thought they would love that because clearly I was the only man in the group. The rest of them were, graduate students, accountants, never faced anything difficult in their lives. My life was so infinitely richer than theirs. And they all listened to me and sort of nodded. Yeah. Toward the end of the week, the leader of the group, I don't know what prompted him, but he gets up and he says, look, guys, we've been talking about the fact that every man has a female side, every female has a male side. Psychologists call it the anima and the animus. But that to be complete, you have to recognize and acknowledge the fact that that's the way it is, and you have to get in contact. If you're a man, you have to get in contact with that feminine side, or you're never going to be complete. So he says, so it's important to get in contact with the feminine side. So then he says, out of the blue, he says, okay, we've been here a week. We've been talking. Who do you all think is the most feminine man in the room? Feminine, not in a bad sense, but feminine in the sense of having a deep feminine side that needs to be used, explored. And I thought, well, maybe it is that little accountant that's always weeping or whatever. And anyway, these guys, I guess there were more than 8. There were more like 15 of them. And they didn't hesitate. And they all immediately pointed toward me as the most feminine man in the room. I couldn't believe it. So I shouted curses at them that they had no idea what they were talking about. None of them had climbed Mount McKinley. None of them had done all the stuff I'd done. And I stormed out of that cabin and I went running down a trail, maybe went half a mile before I realized that it was like a huge weight lifted off me, that these men were right. That was what was missing. And they were right, because they kept saying, look, John, we get the John Wayne stories, and that's part of you. We get your adventures were real, but that's only part of you. We also get that there's a heart in there, that at root you're a gentle, compassionate guy with a full life to lead, and you idiot, keep suppressing that, and you're ruining your life. And you got to get with it. You got to recognize the completeness of your life of the feminine side, or you're in real problems. So I sat down there in the middle of this trail and just, again, I think I was just crying as I realized. But then I did realize it was like a huge weight lifted off as I began to pry off this heavy board that had settled across my heart, and to begin looking at a fuller life and trying to crawl out of that hole. It didn't happen overnight. It was 2 steps forward and 1.5 steps back. But I began to have better relationships with my own kids, for example, with other people, real friendships. I began to look at the world's problems, poverty, disease, violence, not as things I wanted to be part of, but things I wanted to help cure. I wanted to help make a positive dent in the world, not the opposite. And the State Department helped out. They didn't know what they were doing, but they sent me to the United Nations and put me in charge of American policies toward most of the so-called third world, the poor nations of Africa and Asia, where there was a whole lot of problems, disease, violence, whatever. And I began to work hard for peace and justice issues, which was really interesting because the United States as a country in those years really didn't give a damn about these poor countries. The only thing we cared about was fighting the then Soviet Union in the Cold War. And these little countries were votes at the UN, and I was supposed to round up their votes. That's all they cared about. But I became to care deeply about the problems that were overwhelming, like a third of the planet, half the planet. And so I began, like I say, working hard on peace and justice issues, often without any permission from my own government. Sometimes at cross purposes with my own government. I mean, I should have been fired. I helped end apartheid, for example, which is something I'm quite proud of, the system of institutionalized racism in South Africa. I took enormous risks to do that, including telling African foreign ministers all about the gun runners in the United States and the congressional senators and representatives who were making money off shipping guns to the South African police and enforcing apartheid. But it succeeded, and my efforts against apartheid succeeded. And the UN passed a tough embargo on shipping guns to South Africa, which cut off a lot of the means the South African whites had for suppressing blacks. And it was a key factor in the ending of apartheid. So there I am at the United Nations, and now my life is completely turned around. I'm an engine for peace and justice, and the UN and the Foreign Service isn't can't catch up with me. I want to go further, faster than any of them could, and so I quit the Foreign Service, even though I was really at the top of my game. I quit, and I looked for making a life as an engine of good, if you will. This is like 1980 and and I hadn't thought about anything else practical like making money. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I realize that I still have to make a living. I still have two kids. I still have to make a living. A friend of mine says, "Hey, they pay a lot of money for people lecturing on cruise ships." So I said, "Really? That sounds crazy, but it's true." And so I signed on to lecture. I've always had a good gift of gab, so I figured, why not? Lecturing on a cruise ship heading from Vancouver to Tokyo, the Far East and back. And I get to take my daughter Mallory, who's then 13, along with me on this cruise ship. And 3 days out from Vancouver, this damn ship catches fire and starts to sink in the North Pacific. And
Oh,
at the same time, Typhoon Vernon hits in the North Pacific. And the ship is burning, so we have to abandon the ship, and we're in a lifeboat in the middle of this typhoon, and it's cold. It's October in the Gulf of Alaska, and we're 140 miles from shore. And the helicopters do work as fast as they can, but there's 550 people in these lifeboats. I see my daughter rescued, and that's good. Um, Most everybody is rescued. In fact, it comes down to just 8 of us left in a lifeboat. And now the helicopters can't fly anymore because the typhoon is so bad that it's suicide to fly a helicopter in that weather. And so the only recourse, the only possible thing to keep me alive in that adventure was a Coast Guard cutter, a small ship, frantically searching for this tiny lifeboat in the middle of a storm where the visibility was maybe down to 100 yards, and winds were at 60 knots, and the waves were 20 to 30 feet. I mean, that's like a 60-foot wall of water in a little lifeboat. We're all deathly seasick, but more than that, we're dying of hypothermia, and I know what hypothermia is. We're all going to be dead in 6 or 7 hours, frozen to death, dying of the exposure of hypothermia. And so the key thing is the light. It's a small enough chance that the Coast Guard cutter will find us in the waning hours of daylight. But once it's dark, they'll never find us. We have no lights, no flares, no reflectors, nothing like that. So we're dead. Once it's dark, we're dead. And so I remember I wasn't a religious person, still am not. I hope that doesn't disappoint any viewers. But anyway. I had to pray because I don't know what else you do in a situation like that where it's clear you're going to die. You might as well pray. I mean, what the hell? What do you lose? So I turn up and I say, what the hell? I basically, it wasn't a prayer. I was just angry. I said, wait a minute, wait a minute. I helped end apartheid. I was doing a lot of good at the United Nations. Yeah, I knew about my previous life, but I have changed and I'm now doing I say, God's work.
mhm.
So why am I being wiped out? It's stupid. I mean, what you're doing is stupid, and I don't understand it, and I don't like it. And I was screaming at God, and I heard this voice. The other 7 guys didn't hear anything, but I heard a voice. Could have been the wind, but I heard this voice. And it basically said in so many words, stop kidding yourself, John. You get out of this one, you'll lecture on another cruise ship on those wonderful ideals you developed after that battle in Vietnam. It's about saving the world, remember? You got to get serious about those ideals and implement them, or you might as well die out here because the next 50 years won't be worth living. It's your choice. Well, well, I can see I was going to die. So I was beaten and I just turned into the teeth of the storm and I whispered, yes. That's it. I just whispered, yes. And in that instant, and here's where your viewers are really going to doubt my story, but I swear it's true. The instant I said yes, the Coast Guard cutter Boutwell comes crashing through this storm right at us. Would have broken us in two had the lookout not seen us.
Oh,
So I'm rescued, and I've never looked back, and I've kept that promise. I went back to New York, and I met and married an incredible woman named Ann Medlock, who had started something called the Giraffe Heroes Project, not about animals, but about people sticking their necks out. And she would tell the stories of people doing that, brave people making a difference in the world. And in telling those stories, inspire lots of other people to do good too. So this, I thought, was a great vehicle. Not at first, but I gradually began to see it was a great vehicle for my idealism too. So at the same time, I must say, to be completely open about all this, I also fell madly in love with Anne. And everything she was doing became like wonderful. Um, so I joined her in about 1982, 83. And the two of us have been working on the Giraffe Heroes Project ever since. The mission hasn't changed, although now we found almost 2,000 people around the world, men, women, every color in the rainbow, most every country, and we tell their stories of these heroes, and other people indeed follow their lead and become heroes themselves. We've invented and written the whole curriculum for kids, all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade. I've written 5 books now, all on the themes of courage, meaning, service, all those kinds of of things, and that's what I keep doing. I'm now 83, and I see no reason to stop. And I'm on your podcast because this podcast is a vehicle for me. I hope this story reaches people and they understand that, man, you can change your life. You can turn it around, and you can, if there is a board over your heart, you can rip it off. There's a life beyond that, a life of helping people, a life of being of service to the world, and it is the most satisfying thing you'll ever find. And that's my punchline, I guess. Maybe I should say this at the very end of the podcast, but in any case, I have found a truism that the most important thing in anyone's life is to find the true meaning of your life. What is your life about? What is your life purpose? And my experience, because I tried to find it in lots of other places, I tried to find meaning in adventure, and that didn't work, at least not for long. I have plenty of friends who are still trying to find meaning in their life through money, power, and they're going to find out sooner or later, maybe on their deathbed, but they'll find out that's too shallow too. That the real meaning in life comes from service, from giving back, from seeing public problems and solving them, making life better for other people. That's what brings the kind of satisfaction that really makes life worth living. And you don't have to become Mother Teresa. You don't have to do sackcloth and ashes to do this, as I'm sure you know, Kim, from all of your experience. You can be of service as a businessman, a business person, for example, making a good product, selling it at a fair price, good labor conditions, good environmental conditions, being a good neighbor in the communities where your company operates. All those things make what you're doing a service. You can be of service as a barber, as a carpenter, as a laborer, as a housewife, whatever. There are ways to be of service. You just kind of look at your life and see what you got. I mean, what are your skills? What are your resources? What can you use? What's the building blocks you can use to find your service? And once you do, and you start pursuing that, your life changes. And I keep saying that, and my 5 books say that, and I'll keep saying that, and I'm saying it again to however many people you and I are reaching. But at this point, I'm going to shut up because I tend to run on. But these damn stories, I tell you, they still envelop me, and I do love telling them, as I hope your audience recognizes. I love telling these stories because I think they have an impact. But I tell them not just to entertain. I tell them as a teaching tool to try to prompt people to say, hey, there are adventures in my life as well. Maybe not dying in a lifeboat or climbing a fearsome mountain, but there are all kinds of adventures, and they're the adventures of finding what makes my life meaningful, and I'm going to pursue it. Now, I'm shutting up. You get to ask a question. You get to do
Well, thank
something.
you. Well, first of all, thank you for your stories and for connecting it to meaning because the purpose of this podcast is for people to find their purpose and to live it, to master whatever they need to master and to share their gift with the world. And, I had a mentor, he's recently gone from us now, but one of the things he did is had us find a personal mission, a mission for our life. So that might be a little different than what our career is, but it's a mission for our life. And his personal mission was to leave things better than he found them. And I thought that was a great mission. So no matter where you are, If there's trash on the ground, you pick up the trash. If someone's feeling sad, you say something, funny to make them laugh. I mean, just little things like that. So it can be something big, like you said, like having adventures, but it can also be something just simple.
Yes, absolutely. And it can be in all kinds of ways too. And I really want to emphasize on people, and I hope they get that being nice and being of service is not namby-pamby at all. It's the toughest thing on the planet. And the toughest people I know are people that devote their life to some kind of service. They're the toughest people I know. I do a lot of speaking, public speaking. Before COVID, I would speak in person to mostly audiences of business people because they were the hardest audiences, and I wanted the hardest audiences because they would take a look at me, realize I was coming from the nonprofit world, and they would, oh man, I gotta listen to this guy. Ah, God, he's Mother Teresa, or he's gonna tell me to be good and contribute to his foundation or whatever.
Mhm.
I don't do that. If I'm given 45 minutes to give a speech to a boardroom of 12 people or a ballroom of 5,000 people, I always start the same way. I use almost all my time to tell my adventure stories, which I've just spent half an hour telling. And so everyone recognizes that I'm the toughest son of a gun in the whole room, that none of them have done the kind of stuff that I've done, and that I know what I'm doing. And here's this tough guy. Toward the end of that, I turn things around and say, hey, I did a 180 in my life, and here's why. And I explain why, which, I've been talking about on this podcast. I explain why, and I say, look, you got you're on the same search. You look at a mirror in the morning, and you want to know who's looking back at you makes a difference. You don't want to just think you're on this planet like just marking time. Life is not about being a clock with no hands on it. Come on, man. Look for that meaning. And I'm telling you that I found it, but only after a long, brutal search, I found it. And you will too. And at that point, because they're on the edge of their seats with all my mountain climbing stories and stuff, they tend to listen. And I have a lot of good reactions, especially from tough audiences. So yeah, I just want to underscore the fact that the doing good in the world is the toughest thing you'll ever do, uh, and uh, and there's nothing namby-pamby about it.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your masculine and feminine side. So, you said during the early part of your story, you didn't want to be like dad because basically people were taking advantage of him. So you didn't want to be taken advantage of, basically. So we could consider that the female side, but is it really the female side? Um, and then you went to the extreme masculine, the tough, no feeling. So, how do we find both pieces and put them together in a way that is beneficial for ourselves?
Mm. For me, it was other people screaming at me that they saw it and I didn't. And then it was also, mostly important, the inner pain. I mean, I stopped in that battle in Vietnam. It wasn't the Viet Cong holding a rifle at me. I stopped because I just couldn't do it anymore. Something was wrong. And I realized, because I was responsible for people dying, right? And I was, if I was a patriot, it'd be different. Oh, I just killed three more of the enemy. No, I knew the war was wrong. I also know that the people on the other side were the North Vietnamese conscripts from maybe 18 years old, and they were fighting for a cause. And the only cause I was fighting for was to keep Nixon and Kissinger happy in the White House so they could win another election. And that was pretty damn shallow. And so that's what caught me up. It was just my life had become so shallow, and I wasn't about to commit suicide. I never had those thoughts, but I had to do something. There had to be some drastic change if I was going to live the rest of my life. I had to do it differently. So it was a personal revelation.
And then let's talk about courage. So, when you were working at the United Nations, it would take a lot of courage to do what you did, as far as even going against what the majority of people, in the country wanted or what the government wanted. So, how do you become courageous in that situation? Because so many of us have these fears, like, like you could have lost your job. A lot of people have children or whatever. They're afraid to stand up and do something because they might lose their job or use their reputation or.
Yeah. That's all true. This is being a good person is can be a risky business, and certainly ending apartheid was risky. Uh, I did all this stuff behind the scenes dealing with African diplomats to the United Nations, and I finally built up a coalition of African diplomats that would follow me or I would work with. And I would give them documents and I would suggest ways they should attack my own government. I, one of the things that I remember most was I remember someone showing me a cable. In those days, there were cables before internet. A cable that my own boss, the American Secretary of State, had just gotten from an African foreign minister, complaining bitterly about American hypocrisy regarding apartheid. And Jimmy Carter was saying all the right things about, oh, apartheid is bad, but in point of fact, America was doing nothing to end the condition. In fact, making it worse by allowing gun runners in the United States to ship guns to the police in South Africa. So this guy, this African foreign minister, was really violent, really, really angry. But the point is that in the middle of his cable, I saw a sentence or a sentence and a half that I myself had drafted a month before, given to his guy at the United Nations in a bar in New York. He sent it to his boss back in Africa, and it had come rocketing back to my boss. But it had all been me.
Mhm.
Now, had I been caught out of that, well, being fired would have been the least of it. I probably would have been put in jail. I don't know. But
Mhm.
why did I do it? Again, I come back to meaning. You get to a point in your life where nothing is more important that your life be meaningful. And that turns a lot of obstacles that may seem like huge mountains into speed bumps. Yeah, yeah, you may lose your jobs. You may lose your job. But hell, I mean, if something really important that needs to be done, you take that risk. You'll find another job if you have to, but damn it, what you're doing, well, it helps save a lot of people, helps save lives, help end a disease, helps, you know, politically it helps somehow. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and not out of a sense of oh, I want to go to church and be a good guy. No, it's just a question of finding what's meaningful, and what's meaningful is service, and service is about doing good. It's about solving public problems. So it's putting things in perspective, and I have the utmost sympathy for the people you described earlier that are hesitant to act because they don't want to lose their job. They have two kids in college. They're scared, etc. I get it. I totally get it. Boy, do I ever get it. I'm just saying that fine. I understand all that. So, you lift up the corner of the rug you can lift. It's like you were saying earlier, small things help. So maybe it isn't confounding your boss in some mighty way that could get you fired or or double crossing your own Secretary of State. Maybe it's something much quieter that you, because you're really smart, you can do on your own. Maybe it's letters to the editor or quiet meetings with this person or that person or something that moves the ball ahead. And I say that now, especially now, when
Mhm.
the country is breaking apart. I've got little sympathy for for what Donald Trump is doing. I don't want to make this a political conversation, but God, there's a lot of damage being done, and one person isn't going to stop it all. But 100,000 people, 1 million people, 10 million people, they're going to stop it just by standing up and standing together and saying, no, no, that's not right. I don't like that. I'm going to object. I'm going to form a group and demonstrate. I'm going to write my congressman and tell him to shape up. I'm going to recognize my own skills. I write well, I do this well, I do that well, and use these skills to try and make the world a better place, to try and change things at a level where I can reach, where corner of the rug I can lift up. So I talk to people that way, because if you just shout at people, well, I don't care how scared you are, do it. Well, it doesn't do much good. They just think you're a madman. So you
Mhm.
look at people, and again, you say something like, "You lift up a corner of the rug you can lift up." What are your skills? What can
Yeah.
you do with those skills? Look in the mirror. The person that looks back, you know you want that person to be telling you that your life means something, that it's worth living, that you're not on the planet just to do nothing. So yeah, you got two kids in college. I get that. You got a mortgage to pay, and not only that, but you're an introvert and don't like to step out in front. I get all of that, but find something. Find that corner of the rug. It'll change your life.
Yeah. And I want to make a distinction here, especially during COVID and even a little bit after that time. It seems like a lot of people, at least in the United States, were kind of against each other, like one political party or another, or a race or another, or, you know, all of a sudden everyone was taking things personally and starting fights. And I thought to myself, what if we took all that energy and came together and did something positive? Because just fighting with each other is not really doing anything, and just complaining or walking around talking about things isn't really doing anything. So how do we actually do things that move the needle in a positive direction?
Hmm. If I had the answer to that, the politics in this country would be a lot saner and better. It's true. It's a very polarized country. I get angry myself sometimes. I can't even talk to some of the people that think differently than I do. But at the other hand, there is a middle ground. I lived in this country. I'm old enough to recognize that Democrats and Republicans have worked together on lots of stuff, and the country's gone back and forth, a right-wing president, a left-wing president, but we all come back. It sails back and forth over a mean. This
Mhm.
time looks like it's really dangerous, and people have to get active. But you have to reduce the threat is the thing. And so many of the people I know who are MAGA Republicans, they just feel really threatened. They don't dare not do what they're doing because they think they'll be run over by communists or socialists or people that don't understand. Or they're in small town Oklahoma and they think that people in Boston and San Francisco are just treating them shamefully, which may be true in some cases. Uh, and so you need to sit down and talk, and you need to again start at a place where you can reach. I bet every person listening to this has a family member who's on the other side of some of these weighty political issues. Well, that's next Thanksgiving dinner or whatever, next time you sit down, talk to Uncle Harry. Start talking about something you agree in, which is your grandkids are really doing well in high school. But then move into stuff that's perhaps a little political, and you'll find a lot of common ground. I think, for example, this immigration thing it's become absolutely huge, but there has been bipartisan solutions to the immigration crisis for 20 years. It's real simple. I mean, it really is conceptually real simple. We need immigrants in this country, if only to do work that we Americans don't want to do. And not only that, but immigrants have always been a huge addition to this country. At the same time, we can't have open borders. There has to be a system for allowing immigrants in, and you have to have a policy for doing that. Let in people that can really move this country forward. And you don't let in criminals and whatever, people that will make things worse. And that's Congress people have known that for 20 years. And yet it gets hung up in Congress time after time because they shout and scream at each other to the point where they can't even hear themselves think. And it's a shame. I think other things are the same way. I think some things are probably so difficult, some moral and social issues are so difficult, let's say abortion, that there's never going to be an agreement, but we have to live with a disagreement. Somehow we have to live with a disagreement. And we were living with that disagreement. My sister and I have opposing views on this issue. It doesn't mean I don't love her or we don't talk amicably. I get her point of view. She gets my point of view, you know. So it's a difficult question you ask, and if I had a glib answer, I would leave this podcast and run for president. But I don't have an easy answer, but a lot of it is just going back to what makes not only your life meaningful, what makes life meaningful for the person that you're at odds with. And I guarantee you, it's pretty going to be pretty much the same thing. Finding purpose, finding some purpose that makes sense. And the purpose isn't to squash the other party in elections. The purpose is to move the ball forward. The purpose is to do something that makes life better, not only for my grandchildren, but for your grandchildren as well.
I agree. I agree. So, you have the Giraffe Project, you have your books, and I'm sure people want to hear more stories from you. So, if they wanted to find out where your books are, or, find out about the Giraffe Project, or if they know somebody that maybe would be a candidate for that, how do they connect with you?
Sure, and I hope there's something that you post along with this thing that gives people they don't have to remember all this stuff. But almost all the questions you ask are easily answered on the project's website, which is real simple: giraffe.org, giraffe.org, GIRAF. Two F's in giraffe. It's amazing how many people can't spell it.
Mhm.
So giraffe.org. My personal stories are in a memoir, and the name of the memoir is Quest, Quest dash Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning, on Amazon, of course, and from your bookstore. I also want to tell people about something new I just started, and I'm really excited about it. I started a bunch of short form videos, just 3 minutes, and put them on TikTok, and very soon they're going to go on YouTube as well. And the videos, the first 3 minutes, the first 2 minutes are me telling a abrogated story of one of my adventures, and then I pivot to some kind of life lesson that stems from that adventure. The life lesson might be about courage or perseverance or honesty or something. And then I relate that to the adventure I've just had. And then there's usually a call to action. And I'm having great success with them. I'm just started and I've gotten over 150,000 viewers. Anyway, the series is called Badass Granddad. Badass, all one word, and badass with two D's in the middle. You can dial it up in the search box of TikTok, or very soon you can look at it. I think maybe you can look at it already on YouTube. And just watch. It's just 3 minutes long. But I did it to grab the attention of those people who exist on their phones and then can't pay attention for more than 3 minutes. Mostly young people, but not entirely. And so, yeah, badass granddad. So, yeah, put that on the list of things people can do.
All right. Yeah. And I have all that in the show notes too. So, but I just like so that when people listening, they can also hear it. So, now a personal question. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Ah, moving one more person to make that step in his or her life, to listen, to look at what the challenges are, and saying, "Yeah, I can do that, and I'm gonna do it." One person. I say that before I walk. If I walk out into an audience of 5,000 people before I step on that stage, that's what I say. If only I can change one person in this whole audience, this is worth it.
Totally agree. I totally agree. Well, thank you so much for telling your stories and coming on and just encouraging people. And I just really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure being here, Kim, and thank you for doing this podcast. It's a service. Thank you.
Yeah. So, my last question is, what's your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Never forget the search for meaning. That's what it's at. Never forget it. And don't stop until you found it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Bye
We'll
bye.
talk to you again soon.